Hello, everyone, and welcome to the J by J Festival. My name is Ilya Tovbis. I'm the Artistic and Managing Director. The festival is running May 23rd to 30th and is a program of the Edlovich DC JCC. I am thrilled today to be joined by Thor Klein and Lena Verma. They're the director and producer of Adventures of a Mathematician, a film that you can experience physically. We were just talking right before we recorded here that is actually going to be the world premiere of a drive-in screening of this film. It's been, of course, with COVID, and I'm sure we'll touch on it later, playing a little bit more in the virtual space than perhaps originally intended, but we're thrilled to be showing it somewhat as intended on a large screen in person before your eyes. It's one of 11 outdoor programs at the festival, and there's over 30 virtual ones. And this program is going to be on Tuesday, May the 25th, starting at 7:30 p.m. So that's next Tuesday at Union Market. We do hope to see you there, or that you're watching this after you've seen it there, to get some more about the film. So first off, Lena and Thor, thank you for a beautiful film, and thank you for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you for inviting us.
Of course. So perhaps we could just start at the beginning. How did you first happen upon Stan Ulam's incredible life, and what made you decide that this needs to be a film? Of course, it was in several other formats first, most prominently a book and his own memoirs. What made you think that this needed to be told on screen?
Well, when I was about 13 years old, I discovered this book in the library in my hometown in Germany. It was called Who's Got Einstein's Office? And it was basically an account about the Institute for Advanced Study, this fantastic place on the East Coast where the US invited the most famous thinkers in the world, the 30s, to just basically think. And Stan was one of them. And Johnny, and I've read about them in this book, and I was quite fascinated because these guys were driving fast cars, throwing parties, and were completely different from the math teachers I had in school. So I thought for a while to become a mathematician myself, actually. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, I wasn't very talented. But back then I thought, okay, that doesn't matter because I'm maybe a late riser. But when I was 16 years old, I was sitting next to a guy in class which was clearly talented, and it became very obvious for me that I'm not. And it was quite traumatic, but at the same time, I had a great literature teacher, and he made me aware that I was maybe more interested in the stories of these people, even though I'm also still to this day very interested in their mathematical ideas. But that helped me to continue reading about them, and I understood after keeping reading about these times and these people that what on the surface seemed like a life of parties and fast cars and stuff like that was, of course, just the surface. They suffered greatly from having their families in Europe and were not be able to be in touch with them, and they escaped in this world of friendships and mathematics, of course. And that always stayed with me, this kind of intense feeling about these times. And when I was in film school, I came across Stan's book, Adventures of a Mathematician, and I was so fascinated that it had this friendship of Stan and Johnny in the center. And I saw immediately that this could be a great film and a great story to tell visually. And I talked to my producer Lena and asked her whether it would probably be possible to adapt to option the rights for the book. And then Lena took over a little bit, and we started to do research together.
Yeah. So Lena, can you walk? Yeah, I think I was going to say, Lena, if you could walk us through your part of the process. Because there's obviously a lot between optioning a book and actually getting it onto the screen.
Yeah, I think it took now 5 years from basically the first idea to option the book and then now releasing the film. So it's a long time. But yeah, no, I had to find out who has the rights to the book. It was UC Berkeley Press. So I had to negotiate with them. The good thing is that we also found out who are the relatives of Stan who are still alive. 5 years ago, so we were also in touch with his daughter Claire and also with his nephew Alex Ulam, who is the son of Adam Ulam, who is also in the film. So yeah, so basically we took it from there. I optioned the rights to the autobiography, but at the same time, Thor and myself, we went traveling quite a bit and did a lot of research in the US, in Poland, in the Ukraine, where Lviv is, which was Lviv back then and was Poland back then. So we've been all over the place to kind of also be able to read kind of between the lines of Stan's book, and to also give something more to the film than you can just read from the book's pages.
We were very lucky also to find a lot of time witnesses, in these different countries, in the Ukraine and Poland and the US, on the East Coast, the West Coast, and Los Alamos, and spend a lot of time in these great archives you have in the US. The American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia, for example, or of course the Library of Congress in Washington, which was was a great help for me because I could read all the letters and the correspondence they had among them in the US between Edward Teller, Johnny von Neumann, and Stan, and that let the whole thing grew. It grew richer by the day. And of course, it also confronted us with an enormous complexity because the topic is so rich. But it was from there we essentially developed it into what it became then when we shot it.
So I'm glad that you bring all this up, the research and the personal letters. One of the most compelling and engaging aspects of the film to me, and I'm sure we'll get to the complexity, as you mentioned, of the moral situation. And there's so many themes throughout the film, but I think where it starts, and even one of the very first things you see on screen is, this is Ulam's account. He's in, I think, just about every scene. It's his story, for better or worse. You see it from his perspective. And I found that the film gives a very human view of him, first and foremost, and of those around him. There's a lot of humor. There's a lot of just simple joke telling. You get the sense that he's a brilliant thinker, but it doesn't dive too deep into the math, which is good because probably the typical audience would not be able to understand. I know I certainly would not. But the humor really sticks out. The personalities stick out. So can you talk about, was that how you were drawn in personally? You mentioned sort of the fast cars and being perhaps surprised that they're not these stodgy scientists that are, just their only, nose deep in the books, that they actually have personalities. Is that what drew you in? And also, how does that actually interface with the more complex moral, like the decisions they had to make? There's almost no-win situations to build or not build atomic and hydrogen bombs, incredibly complicated. And but first you start with them as relatable human beings. How did you do that? And was that what drew you in? Or is that what you hope audiences are drawn to?
Well, since I grew up in Germany and always felt connected to Eastern Europe and traveled there a lot, knew a little bit also about for example, to start with the culture of the jokes. The telling of a joke was not only in these days a very common thing to do. It's a rich culture also in the Jewish culture, especially of jokes. So, and I knew that this was something that connected them because it was just somebody who liked to tell jokes. But I also discovered that within these, the core of it all were these relationships they had because of the families out of the picture for the time being. These friendships became so intense, and they became, of course, substitute for family, but also substitute for a lost European culture. And this I was very aware from the beginning, and I wanted to emphasize on that and to show that because it's very intriguing for me to look at the moral dilemma from this background, from the background of the lost European culture and the fact that these people grew up during the Belle Epoque, the times between the wars, basically in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. That was for me something that I never saw before in film, and that was essentially the story I wanted to tell. And apart from that, my father-in-law is also a Czech immigrant, and he, in a lot of ways, has a similar humor as Stan has. Dealing with complicated emotional situations by simply telling a joke. And so I had it in real life as well. I could see this and this back and forth between reading about all this and traveling through Eastern Europe and having this personality in my family. That helped me to shape the starting point, the undercurrent of it all in the film.
I love that idea of them being the surrogate family, which is, of course, you feel through the film. And what's interesting when you bring it up is, I think as an audience, and this is due to your credit as artists, you feel that. I'm not sure Ulam notices it until the very end. There's a very poignant moment towards the end where John says to him something to the effect, "I'm not sure I've ever told you how much you mean to me." And Ulam, he's uncomfortable. Of course he feels the same, but he's very uncomfortable with that notion. It's better unsaid. It's better just told as a joke or on a hike or something like that. So something that was definitely felt throughout the film. Can you talk a little bit, again, as you're building out these characters, of course, the casting choices were critical. Who actually played Ulam, and then also Esther Garel and some of the other key cast that really surrounded this piece, which I think really brought it to life. Can you talk about why you chose and how that process worked?
Sure. You want to go first? Sure. So what I knew from the beginning is that I wanted to cast the actor very early to give him the chance to really dive into these culture and these people. But through the casting period, there were a lot of ups and downs, and an actor I had earlier in mind, there were some timing issues, and then I had to basically recast. And Philip was literally the person who walked in last on the casting we did on the second casting, so to say. So I was a bit nervous, to be very honest with you, because I knew it's so critical that the actor has a certain way to move, to talk, to get the posture of these people, that it could very easily go wrong. It's a very, very fine line to walk. And I was so happy when Philip came in, because essentially he could not even. The thing is, he was shooting another film, and he did not have the time to learn the lines by heart. So he had what we call in filmmaking a cold reading, more or less. He had the page, but still he just blew us all away. And we were really lucky of having him as in the center of all of that. And I knew also from the beginning that all the actors should ideally come from the respective countries. Like the Polish guys, Stan and Adam, should be Polish, and I wanted to cast Hungarians for the Hungarian part. It was not always possible, because it was not possible to find so many Hungarian actors. So I had to cast, or I came across people like Joel Bassman, who's a fantastic actor, comes from a Jewish family, and understood a little bit the way I saw at the teller, especially. But he was Swiss, which of course we had to accept at a certain point. So it came together piece by piece over a long period of time, because we were really carefully by choosing the actors. And Lena was also a great help in that, because you need a lot of patience. You can get nervous in the casting process because everybody wants to lock it, and this is the cast. We go, now we can go. If you always have to tell, oh, we're in the middle of casting, we're not sure yet, it takes some kind of, you need to have the courage to go the casting process till the end, till you have the perfect cast.
And I think what was exciting to me is also that this is an English language film, but at the same time, they're all immigrants and they bring their own accents, like we have our accents speaking English. So it was also interesting to see now Polish actors or Esther Garel from France having to speak English in an international production, and what it does to them, what it does to us. Also, hopefully they will get cast for international productions in the future as well. For example, someone like Mateusz Wicławek, who played Adam Ulam, who is the younger brother of Stan. I think he's an unbelievable talented actor, and I just hope that also kind of by showing the film now all around the world, that they will also get discovered as talent.
Absolutely. So one of the other things that, of course, ties many of the characters, not only are they immigrants, but there are a lot of people, not everyone, but many of the main cast have Jewish backgrounds. And of course, we're a Jewish film presenter. So I'm curious how you approached. On one hand, it always felt to me like it was never far from the film, but it was also never in the center of the film. You had this sense that the Holocaust was always just off frame, that it was, of course, motivating many of the scientists to create this ultimate weapon to end the war. But then at the end, I think also one of the most heartbreaking moments, going back to Adam, who you just mentioned, when he, has led a very difficult life. He felt abandoned by Ulam. He was abandoned by Ulam in large part. and wants to really shed his Jewish identity. Can you talk a little bit about how you decided to treat the character Judaism, how much you considered them fleeing the Holocaust, how that all factored into the story for you?
In the case of, doing my research, I met a lot of people who had talked about this, because of course these people had Jewish backgrounds in a lot of cases. And I came across this thing called survivor's guilt, that there were a lot of people who really had severe problems because they could not somehow deal with the fact that they survived and all their friends didn't survive. And Adam was one of these people who basically also never talked much about him being Jewish outside from his family. And I that was something that I felt was very heartbreaking for me to hear on one hand. On the other hand, it also gave me an insight in the thing that it's the pressure that the situation put on them. And for me, it was also very clear from basically the beginning, but I learned it also through writing the different drafts, that of course this issue was massive in all of their lives, in regards also to the weapon. Someone like Edward Teller, I think, cannot be fully understood without his because he's people perceive him as this kind of cold warrior, essentially, who and of course he was that, and he's a very kind of controversial figure. But also when I read about when I learned about his childhood and the way he grew up, and what he saw, for example, when the Russians came into Hungary, in the 20s, and all the things that happened there, which were also very gruesome. I could understand why he was very suspicious about Russia throughout his whole life. So the fact that they all dealt with their Jewishness in a different way gave me insight in these characters, and at the same time, it was not that they were walking around 24 hours a day talking about this topic. It was just there, but also not there. But you could clearly feel it, and it was partly this complex issue of, for example, building the hydrogen bomb, because the atomic bomb more or less was a straightforward thing. There was this more than a suspicion, this kind of belief that the Nazis were building the atomic bomb as well. So it was a clear thing. You would go into that because they did it. And Einstein basically gave his consent to do it. So on that point, but the hydrogen bomb was a way more difficult thing. Why would you go further? Why is it necessary to do that? And I think this mixture of the friendships and the intensity and the Jewish question is, in my opinion, the answer why they went that far.
I think also what I thought is very intriguing from the beginning, that you said that you never want to show the bomb, and basically also you never see the war as well, but it's always there. You kind of basically you see it in the faces of the protagonists in the story, and sometimes for me this was way more intense as if you would just show maybe some images we've seen 100 times or 1,000,000 times before, with the exploding of the atomic bomb, for example. We always thought, like, is it missing? But then in the end, we just knew, no, we cannot show it, because it has to just be this kind of shadow over everybody. And I think that's what I think is really intriguing about the film as well.
I agree entirely. I mean, I think as an artistic choice, it was a great one, and there showed a lot of restraint, because I think it would have been easy, it would have been dramatic, it would have been the natural choice to make. On the other hand, I also feel like just with the character, it makes it much more relatable, because that is the way we experience. We were not around. We didn't see this action happen. And so the way we experience things is through our surroundings, through our friends, through the facial expressions. And you understand the importance, you understand the gravity of the situation, but you don't necessarily get it by seeing the newsreel footage. You actually get it by being in the midst. So to me, it was actually brought me a lot closer to the story. And that's actually another question leads me to, it had a very interesting story structure, and I'm wondering if you based this on the book or if it was a decision more from you and the others on the filmmaking team about the story was sort of told in these vignettes. There were moments of time that were skipped. You might think at the beginning of the film that the climax, maybe the film would even end with the building of the bomb, and now it's actually right about at the midway point. And a lot of it had to do with the fallout, and then of course also the concept of building the hydrogen bomb and the issues he had with his mind. Can you talk a little bit about what went into, at what point did you figure out this is the way the story is going to be told, not just what the story is?
The book is told in a very anecdotal way. So it's like spending an evening, you know, or maybe 2 evenings with Stan, and he's just telling stuff, you know, in a chronological order, but also just from top of his head. That's the feel of the book, which and between the lines, because he tells this also in a very light tone, but you realize, you know, there's so much between the lines. And I knew that I did not want, because I don't think you can capture a life in this classical 3-act structure with want and need and you know, and then it's all resolved, because of course we all know it. I mean, life is, you have the main questions, the problems in your life, they change over the course of time. There are a few ones that are consistent, and so I knew I wanted to choose more of an epical structure rather than a dramatic structure. And that I discovered through the process of writing, kind of not early on, but in the process. But then, while shooting the film, I also had to rewrite some of the scenes while shooting it. I realized, okay, I'm missing here this little. I always wanted I knew that I demanded a little bit from the audience. You know, you need to be interested in the subject a little bit. It does not necessarily. It helps if you know a few things here and there, you know, but I like this because I myself also like to be, when films challenge me in that way a little bit. And I thought leaving little gaps here and there, rather than giving these usual, you know, explaining scenes that you have in films that sometimes take away from the mystery, because in the core of it, there is a mystery that I cannot answer. You know, it's why do people make decisions? Also in life, you never know fully. I mean, you have your theories and you have other theories of other people, but you never know. So you just observe and then you draw a conclusion. And I wanted to put the audience in this position to be able to get these points, but they have to draw to a certain degree their own decisions about what to think of these people. That's a little bit
And I think what I really liked is when we showed the rough material first time to our editor, Mathieu Taponnier, who also edited Son of Saul, the Oscar-winning film. When we showed the material first time to him, he said, well, it feels more like a piece of music than a film. And so he kind of felt this, as we call it, epical structure, that you can emotionally understand it more like a piece of music than a film, maybe, and that really stayed with me.
Yeah, it's because I mean, you know, sometimes you get, when you shot a film and then when you go into editing the film, especially when you shoot in these long takes where you essentially set a certain tone, and you cannot change only so much. You know, I don't have, you know, 20 shots to tell one scene. I have essentially one shot, maybe another one if
you're lucky.
Yeah, but you have one shot. And
I like how the producer points that out. Say, if you're lucky, keep it moving.
And I was a bit worried in the beginning that I could maybe not figure it out, you know, perfectly. I did not. I have to say also, you learn, you know, with every film you learn stuff. I did not make a long enough break between finishing the film and then starting editing. I was basically 2 weeks later start to edit the film. And I got in a period in the first third of the editing process where I was a bit nervous. I thought, okay, is this really adding up? And then talking to someone like Mathieu, who edited long shots before, and to hear him, to have someone telling you, who was not on set, what he sees in the material, helped also me to perceive the story in another new way, because as you know, I mean, the editing process is just like writing. It's a continuation in a way.
Can you talk a little bit about, I think on one hand, and accurately so, you could perceive it as a historical piece. And it's told historical accuracy. You've done research, clearly a wealth of it. On the other hand, there's a really timely element that it makes sense why the story is to be told today, not just as a piece of history to be dusted off and appreciated and put back. There's a lot to me that feels very current in terms of our relationship with technology, in terms of immigrants from society. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there's something that captured both of you that feels like it's important to talk about in a contemporary manner that's more than just looking back at our past.
Yeah, I think what always puzzled me is that these days, in regards to AI, we are in a little bit of a same situation. We are about to creating a technology that we are not yet sure what the full implications are. We have this idea about what this might be, how the world might look like, but I think once we go further, we will discover that there are a lot of side effects that we didn't foresee. For example, a detail that I didn't completely explain in the film, but that was for me also doing my research process quite fascinating, is that in the beginning they just didn't know that radioactivity actually is such a big deal. They just didn't know. It was all about the explosion, but the long-term, consequences of radiation, they found out by doing it. So if this is something that I think we always will encounter when it comes to technological process. And of course, the other big question was the immigrant topic. To see that all our societies are shaped by immigrants. Of course, I'm not naive. It's a complex topic, but still, you cannot just say, I think there is no culture that evolved and that thrived that had not were not mixing with other cultures at the same time. So that was also an issue.
Yeah, I mean the immigration topic. So his father-in-law, who tells the jokes, the Eastern European jokes, he's my dad. So go figure. So for me, when I knew, of course, his history of fleeing Czechoslovakia in '68 from the Russians to Switzerland, where I was born. So this was an immediate point of where I could relate. But at the same time, what I really liked when Thor came to me with the story was, and I think that is still very timely, that this film doesn't just give you answers, it kind of more raises more questions for you, the audience. And as you said earlier, there is basically a no-win situation for all the sides. And I think especially today, it's still the same, even though everybody wants to see only black and white and yes or no, but it is always more complex. And I think to get in the position of trying to see different perspectives, this is something I really like about the film, and hope that kind of translates into today as well.
So speaking of complexity, and today, as we finish out here, of course, you put a tremendous amount of work, as you mentioned, into this film. You put it out, and you couldn't have known for the majority of the time that it was going to come out during a time of COVID. Can you talk a little bit about what that's been like, trying to birth this into the world at a time when theaters around the world are shuttered, festivals are virtual, if happening at all, and perhaps on a more hopeful note, what have you found that's worked during that period, and what's next for the film? How do you hope that audiences will meet it?
Maybe to start, we were super lucky to have basically the first screening ever just before COVID hit at Palm Springs in January 2020. So just before COVID happened. So we had one event where we didn't know that nothing will happen for a long time right after. And then during the first half year of COVID, basically we tried to not show the film anywhere, because we thought, well, soon the cinemas are going to be open again, and we're going to show it all around the world, and we're going to travel with the film. But of course, after 6 months passed, we just knew, okay, we have to adapt to the situation. And we discussed with all our partners that we will do virtual screenings. And of course, we would have loved to be in all these places. But I think you also can agree that what it helped is thanks to the virtual screenings, that we could be there with Q&As all around the world. And I think more than would have been possible without this situation. So it's also now, I mean, of course, we would love to be in Washington, D.C. with you at the drive-in. But just to be with you in conversation right now is great. And I think that could also maybe this being hybrid between physical screenings, but also virtual ones, or being there virtually as a filmmaker, just to get some feedback as well from all around the world is very helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in our case, what also played in our favor is that we could sell the film in a lot of countries for theatrical releases. So the festivals are also a good possibility to make people in these countries aware of the film, which is, I think, can work greatly. But apart from that, what Lina just mentioned, what I really enjoyed is that, of course, you have great conversations on physical festivals as well, but the situation is different. You are usually in a cinema, people are a bit nervous, they don't ask so many questions. And here I discovered in a lot of cases that the conversations were really good, really good questions and good thoughts. And also the audience, they asked in a lot of cases amazing questions. And this is something that if you then think that you can offer this for people, when you do what in the US, you have what you call virtual cinema, that people buy a ticket and you can choose either to watch the film in the cinema or at home with your friends. You can offer that kind of stuff additional, you can say, okay, maybe you win, a kind of a personal Q&A with director or actors. I think there are great possibilities there that I think will be people will think about this later on when we are out of this, what could be used for also to promote a film, and that's with these different channels we have now.
Yeah, but I mean, of course, we are super happy that especially now with you have a physical screening. Yeah. Also, Samuel Goldwyn will release the film later this year in fall in theaters in the US. So if anyone misses it, there's still a chance to watch it in the US later. And in 2 weeks, we'll have the theatrical premiere in Poland. So slowly but surely in different countries where the cinemas are opening up again, the film will be seen on the big screen as well. So yeah, we're very excited to be seen. And we're on social media. So find us and send us your feedback. It would be really amazing.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I certainly hope that people experience it, whether at our festival or in theaters more broadly, and perhaps even at our own theater when we reopen back in the fall at K. Fritz Hall. We might have a chance to present the film again as a run. Thank you, Lina, and thank you, Thor. Incredible film and great conversation. For those catching this conversation before, the film, once again, is playing on Tuesday, May the 25th at 7:30 p.m. at Union Market. If you're catching this after, I hope that you were with us for that screening or have a chance to see it in theaters afterwards. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Ilya.
Okay. Bye.